are making a soft slab cylinder. I have a template here about 7.5 inches tall by about 11 inches long, and I am going to curl that into my 3.5 inch diameter cylinder. I have already used a straight edge to make a straight edge on that far edge, and now I'm using my T-square to square off this clay. As you can tell, I've got more clay than I need. I want to cut away all of the edges and just use the perfect interior of the slab. I am squaring off that first edge and measuring down 7.5 inches so I can use that squared edge to make my slab the height I want it to be. I made this slab about an hour and a half before I started using it, and I was sure to turn it and compress it to a dry area on my canvas about every 15 or 20 minutes while I was waiting for it to become the perfect dryness for soft slab building. So even though we are building with a soft slab, we are, it's not just out of the bag soft, it's been resting for a little bit. I'm making this panel, the slab is a lot longer than the 11 inches I need because when I curl it up, I want an extreme overlap. You can see there when I rest the slab on the edge, it doesn't slump or sag, meaning it's a perfect dryness for building with. Because it's been lying flat for a while, I need to put some energy into the particle before I try to make it bend. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just giving it a little wiggle and a little tap on both sides just to get that clay loosened up. My clay is a little thixotropic, so that's what's going to work for there. Then I'm coaxing it into the round with an extreme overlap. You'll also notice I use the miter edge tool to bevel one edge. That's the edge that I am going to put the bottom onto. And here I'm using that X-Acto knife to cut into both layers of that extreme overlap. And here I'm cutting in a zigzaggy, curvy fashion, just so you can see how the edges fit together perfectly when you cut through both layers and remove the interior and exterior of that overlap. I'm now going to score that edge very, very well, both sides, and then add a good amount of slip. So that's my clay body, bone dry, slaked in water to this creamy consistency, and I'm going to tap on a good amount of slip to both scored edges there. You can use that curvy seam as a decorative element, or you can rib it until it completely disappears. I'm going to do the latter here, so I am taking some time to really coax those edges together and make it perfectly round. And then I'm going to get a little bit of soft clay out of my bag and make a tiny little fresh clay coil. I'm going to reinforce the interior seam of that cylinder with fresh clay to fill the seam on the inside and strengthen the seam on the inside. So it's a very thin piece of clay. It's laid along the interior seam and then compressed into that seam, sort of like a band-aid over that seam. And just on the inside, so I can use my rib to make that exterior seam really disappear. I have enough clay from my slab to build the base of this cylinder, and I'm building it upside down so that beveled edge is at the top. I don't want to compress that really sharp beveled edge that I have there, so that's why I am building it upside down. And next I am going to cut the base and just very gently place the cylinder on top of the soft slab that I set aside for its purpose and trace around the outside. Incidentally, it's the same slab, the same dryness, the same thickness of the cylinder that I just made, and I'm cutting around the bottom of it. I did mark where it sat on the slab. I don't know if you can see that, and then I'm going to bevel that edge as well using the right angle, the 45-degree angle on that right angle of the miter tool. So we get a nice disappearing edge on the bottom of the cylinder. Once I've mitered that completely, I'm going to slip and score that very well as well. So it's very nicely slipped and scored all the way around, and then I am going to slip and score and slip that bottom bevel as well. Once I have that completely scored and slipped, I'm going to place that base, the cylinder on the base, and rib all of those seams. I'm also going to use a tiny bit of soft clay to reinforce that bottom seam, just like I did with the side seam of the cylinder. Once I have all of those seams completely reinforced and disappeared, I also kind of tapped it there to let gravity help make that seam strong. Use my thumb to wipe away any excess slip, and then I'll use that coil to reinforce that interior seam. I want to take this cylinder and build a bottle from it. And I have additional soft slab that I have set aside for that purpose. But if you just wanted a cup or a vase here, when you're done refining the interior seam, you can go ahead and finish that rim